Have you ever accidentally solved multiple missing persons cases? When I was 12, I started noticing that kids at my school had a weird habit of just disappearing without any real explanation from the adults around us. Principal Lehigh would make announcements over the intercom asking us to keep the missing kids in our prayers. But something felt wrong about the way these announcements always sounded more excited than sad, and something deep in my gut told me that these disappearances weren't random teenage rebellion like the adults kept claiming they were. The first real clue came when I was walking past Principal Lehigh's office after school and saw him carrying a professional video camera and lighting equipment toward the basement stairs. I followed him and found an old bomb shelter from back when the school was built. The basement had been converted into what looked like a professional movie studio, and there were metal restraints bolted to the walls and a table covered with tools that looked more like torture devices than anything a school principal should have. I found a stack of DVDs labeled with names and dates, and when I recognized the name on one of the cases, I realized with absolute horror that these were recordings of what had happened to all the students who had supposedly run away from home. I grabbed 3 of the DVDs and ran back upstairs while my heart pounded so hard I thought it might explode in my chest. I ran home and watched the DVDs, and they were terrifying. I'll never forget the way my classmates screamed and begged for mercy, but Principal Lehigh didn't listen. I spent the rest of the night trying to figure out how to get to the police with what I had discovered without getting myself unalived in the process. My parents were out of town, so I told myself I just needed to wait until they got home, and they'd help me figure out what to do. Until then, I just needed to pretend everything was normal. But the next morning, Principal Lehigh called me into his office and asked me to sit down while he closed the door behind us with this strange smile that made my skin crawl. "I noticed you seemed upset yesterday afternoon, and I wanted to make sure everything was okay at home," he said. I told him everything was fine and tried to leave, but he blocked the door and said something that made my blood turn to ice in my veins. You know, some students have very active imaginations, and they see things that aren't really there, which can be dangerous for everyone involved, including themselves. That afternoon, he announced over the intercom that I would be staying after school for a special leadership program that would help me develop my potential and contribute more to our school community. I knew exactly what that meant, and I also knew that I had maybe 3 hours before I became the star of his next film. I begged all of my teachers for help and told them to call the police, but they all thought I was joking. When the final bell rang, I ran toward the exit, but Principal Lehigh was waiting for me with this calm expression that was somehow more terrifying than if he had been angry or violent. "Time for your special program, and I promise this will be an experience you'll never forget," he said, while grabbing my arm with a grip that left bruises for weeks afterward. He dragged me toward the basement stairs while I screamed for help, but the building was almost empty, and no one could hear me fighting against his grip on my wrist. The basement studio was set up with cameras rolling and lights blazing, and he strapped me into the metal restraints while explaining that my film was going to be his masterpiece, because I had shown so much spirit and intelligence throughout this whole process. "The best ones always fight back because it makes for better entertainment, and you're going to make me a lot of money from people who appreciate authentic performances," he said while reaching for a knife that gleamed under the studio lights. All I could do was pray that one of the teachers I'd told believed me. That's when I heard police sirens getting closer, and Principal Lehigh's face went completely white as he realized that someone had discovered his secret operation. The basement door exploded open, and officers stormed down the stairs with their weapons drawn while I screamed that I was still alive and needed help getting out of the restraints. The police found 17 DVDs of students he'd taken down to the basement before me who hadn't been as lucky. During his trial, he looked directly at me and said, "You have no idea how much money you cost me by interfering with a business that was providing a valuable service to discerning customers." He's on death row, and I live with my aunt in another state now, but I still wake up sometimes thinking I can hear someone coming up the stairs to grab me.